The blue wool blanket draped around the young woman's shoulders marked Arthur Morgan as her husband, according to Comanche law. Chief Kratos stood with crossed arms in the pale morning light, speaking words that would change everything. "You give. Sacred blanket, you take my daughter as wife." Arthur's breath formed clouds in the cold air. 6 warriors flanked the chief, their faces stone. Behind them, the girl wouldn't meet his eyes. She clutched the blanket tighter. "I don't understand. Blanket ceremony is sacred. You honor bond or we honor it for you." The creek nearby whispered over stones. Arthur remembered finding her there last night, shivering, nearly frozen. A simple act of kindness, nothing more. "Chief, I was just trying to help." Kratos stepped closer. His weathered face showed no mercy. "My daughter Ellie, you choose her. She choose you, bond is made." Arthur's hands hung at his sides, empty. The Winchester leaned against his porch, too far away. Not that it would matter against 6 men. What happens if I refuse? Refusing is dishonor. Dishonor means you take what is not given. Punishment is death. The words hung in the morning air like smoke. Arthur studied the girl's face. Something flickered in her dark eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. "There's another way," Kratos continued. "Live among us 1 season. Prove you worthy husband. Learn our ways." Arthur's ranch stretched behind him. 20 years of work, every fence post driven by his hands. Every acre earned with sweat and blood. The cattle lowed in the distance, there. Sounds familiar as his own heartbeat. "I need time to think." "Sunsets today, you decide then." The chief turned to leave. His warriors followed. Ellie lingered for a moment, her fingers working at something in her pocket. A small carved horse fell to the ground. She looked at Arthur once, then hurried after her father. Arthur picked up the carving. The wood was smooth, warm from her touch. Intricate patterns covered its surface. This wasn't the work of idle hands. Someone had spent hours on this piece. He watched the group disappear into the morning mist. Their horses' hoofbeats faded until only the creak remained. Inside his cabin, Arthur stared at the carved horse. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting shadows across the rough wooden table. A letter lay beside his cold coffee. Dutch van der Berg's seal, broken 2 days ago. The words still burned in his memory. "The railroad is coming, Arthur. Change with it or be buried by it. My offer stands, but not forever." Arthur had built this place after the war. After Sarah and Azec died of cholera. After everything good in his life turned to dust. The isolation had been a choice then. Now it felt like a trap. He walked to the window. His cattle dotted the pasture, but fewer than last week. Someone had been taking them, small numbers at first. Now whole groups vanished in the night. The morning stretched long. Arthur tried to work, but his mind wandered. He fixed fence posts that didn't need fixing. Checked water troughs twice. The carved horse never left his pocket. By afternoon, doubts crept in like shadows. The girl hadn't been lost. She'd been watching him. Her clothes were too clean for someone wandering alone. Her hands too soft for hard travel. Arthur saddled his horse and rode to the creek. The spot where he'd found her showed signs of a longer stay. Disturbed earth, a small fire pit carefully hidden. Someone had been camping here for days. He knelt beside the water. Her footprints led upstream, toward Comanche territory. But also downstream, toward his pastures, toward his cattle. The truth settled heavy in his chest. She'd been spying on him. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and promising. Arthur mounted his horse and rode home through the first drops of rain. The cabin felt smaller now, shadows deeper. Arthur lit a fire and sat before it, the carved horse turning over in his hands. Outside, the storm broke in earnest. Rain drummed against the roof, steady and insistent. He thought about the girl's eyes, The way she'd looked at him before dropping the carving, not the look of someone grateful for rescue. Something else. Something that spoke of secrets and careful plans. But there had been genuine cold in her shivering. Real fear when the chief spoke of death. Whatever game was being played, she wasn't entirely willing. Arthur rose and walked to his window. Lightning illuminated the landscape in stark relief. His cattle huddled together against the storm. Beyond them, darkness stretched toward Comanche lands. Tomorrow would bring a choice. Honor a bond he never made, or face consequences he couldn't fight. But tonight, questions multiplied like raindrops on glass. The carved horse sat on his table, a mystery wrapped in smooth wood. Arthur stared at it until the fire burned low, and the storm passed into silence. Dawn would come soon enough. And with it, answers he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. The Comanche camp stretched before Arthur like a challenge written in smoke and leather. Teepees stood in careful circles, their buffalo hide walls weathered to the color of old bones. Children stopped their games to stare. Women turned their backs. Chief Kratos gestured toward a small lodge at the camp's edge. Your place. Learn our ways or leave in shame. Arthur dismounted, his saddle and few possessions weighing heavy in his hands. The ground beneath his boots felt foreign, though it was the same earth as his ranch. The same sky stretched overhead, but everything had changed. Ellie appeared beside her father, no longer wearing his blue blanket. Her doe-skin dress moved with the wind, and her hair hung in thick braids adorned with small bones and feathers. She looked different here, stronger, more certain. I will teach him, she said. The chief's eyes narrowed. Teaching is not your burden, it is now. Father and daughter held each other's gaze. Some unspoken conversation passed between them. Arthur felt the weight of traditions he couldn't understand, rules written in blood and seasons. The chief walked away without another word. Arthur stood alone with Ellie, the camp watching from every shadow. Why did you come to my ranch? Arthur asked. Ellie's hands smoothed her dress, a nervous gesture. Tonight. After the evening meal, we will speak then. She left him standing beside the small teepee. Arthur pushed aside the hide flap and stepped. Inside, the space was cramped but clean. Buffalo robes covered the ground. A fire pit sat cold in the center. Smoke hole open to the sky above. Arthur dropped his belongings and sat heavily on the robes. The silence pressed against his ears, no cattle lowing, no creek babbling. Just the wind threading through the camp, carrying voices in a language he didn't know. The day crawled past in small humiliations. Arthur tried to help with daily tasks and failed at each one. His hands, strong enough to brand cattle and build fences, fumbled with the simple act of preparing tinder. The fire kit defeated him entirely. A young woman named Tess took pity on him. Her English came in careful pieces, measured and deliberate. Fire needs patience, she said, showing him how to catch the spark, like all important things. Arthur finally coaxed flame from the tinder. The small victory felt larger than it should. Tess smiled and moved on to help others. The evening meal brought the whole camp together. Arthur sat beside Ellie, acutely aware of every glance, every whispered conversation. The food was good but strange. Roots and berries mixed with meat he couldn't identify. Chief Kratos stood when the meal ended. His voice carried across the gathering, speaking in Comanche. Arthur caught his own name and Ellie's, but the rest washed over him like water. He tells the story of the blanket ceremony, Ellie said quietly, how it binds two souls across the seasons. Is that what you believe? Ellie's fingers found the carved horse in her lap. She'd retrieved it from his cabin somehow. I believe in many things, not all of them are true. The crowd dispersed slowly. Families retreated to their lodges. Arthur and Ellie remained by the dying fire, the night settling around them like a heavy blanket. I was watching your ranch, Ellie said finally. For 3 weeks. Why? Someone has been attacking our hunting parties, driving away the game, poisoning water holes. She turned the carved horse over in her hands. We thought it was you. Arthur felt the pieces shifting in his mind. It wasn't. I know that now. The fire crackled between them. Sparks rose toward the stars, brief and brilliant before dying in the darkness. My mother carved this horse, Ellie continued, before the soldiers came. Before she died defending our winter camp. Arthur heard the pain beneath her words, the careful control that kept grief from spilling over. I lost my family too, he said. Disease, not war. But the emptiness feels the same. Ellie looked at him then, really looked. Something softened in her expression. Is that why you live alone? Seemed easier than losing people again. Easier is not the same as better. They sat in silence, the truth hanging between them like smoke. Arthur watched the way firelight played across Ellie's face, highlighting the strength in her jaw, the intelligence in her dark eyes. Tell me about the attacks, he said. Ellie's voice grew hard. 3 hunting parties, good men. They found our camps destroyed, our meat spoiled. Tracks led toward your land. But not to my ranch. No, past it, toward the town. Arthur leaned forward. Someone wanted you to think it was me. Why would they do that? Same reason someone's been stealing my cattle. To drive us apart, make us enemies. The fire popped, sending sparks into the night. Arthur thought about Dutch's letter, the railroad plans, the pressure to sell his land. There's more, Ellie said. The man who leads these attacks. He has pale eyes and speaks with authority. The survivors say he wears fine clothes, not the rough garments of common raiders. Dutch van der Berk, Arthur was certain of it now. The man who'd once been his partner in smaller ventures before greed and ambition changed him into something else. I think I know who it is. Ellie's hand moved closer to his across the space between them. Not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth of her skin. Then we stop him. The marriage bond is real, Arthur. Even if the ceremony was not what you intended. My people honor it. Your people will learn to accept it. But first, we find the truth. Arthur studied her face in the firelight. The determined set of her mouth. The way her eyes held his without flinching. You planned this, he said. Not the ceremony, but meeting me. Your father knew. Ellie's silence was answer enough. Why me? Because you're alone. Because you're honest. Because you gave a blanket to a freezing stranger without asking for anything in return. The wind picked up, scattering the fire's heat. Arthur felt the temperature dropping, but something warm was building in his chest. Not passion, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The sense of finding something he hadn't known he was looking for. Tomorrow we start looking for evidence, Ellie said. The attacks follow a pattern. We can find their camp. Arthur nodded. And then? Then we show both our peoples who the real enemy is. She stood, brushing dust from her dress. The carved horse disappeared into a hidden pocket. Arthur, he looked up at her. Thank you, for the blanket, for being here, for listening. She walked away, leaving him alone with the dying fire and the vast star-filled sky. Arthur sat until the coals turned to ash, thinking about loneliness and the unexpected ways it could end. The hidden camp revealed itself in pieces, fresh wagon tracks, scattered bones from slaughtered cattle, the acrid smell of burned sage where water holes had been poisoned. Arthur and Ellie crouched behind a rocky outcrop, watching Dutch van der Berk stride between his hired men. That's him, Arthur whispered. Dutch wore a fine coat despite the wilderness setting. His pale eyes surveyed the camp with the satisfaction of a man whose plans were working. Around him, 6 men tended horses and cleaned weapons. Arthur's stolen cattle grazed nearby, their familiar brands visible in the afternoon sun. Ellie's hand tightened on her rifle. He killed my people. We need proof. Something the chief will believe. They waited until Dutch rode toward town. With half his men, Arthur and Ellie approached the camp through the tall grass, moving silent as shadows. The remaining guards lounged by their fire, confident in their isolation. Inside Dutch's tent, Arthur found what he was looking for. Maps marked with ranch locations. Bills of sale already prepared for Arthur's land. Railroad survey notes detailing the route through Comanche territory. A ledger recording payments to the men for cattle theft and harassment of hunting parties. Ellie gathered Comanche artifacts from the attack sites. Sacred items that shouldn't exist in a white man's camp. Evidence that would speak louder than words to her people. They slipped away undetected, carrying proof of Dutch's deception. The ride back to the Comanche camp felt different. Arthur sensed a shift in the air between them, the way partners feel when they've shared danger and survived. "Your father suspected," Arthur said. "He suspects many things. Proving them is harder." The sun was setting when they reached the camp. Chief Kratos emerged from his lodge, his weathered face grave. Other elders gathered around as Arthur and Ellie displayed their evidence. The chief examined the sacred items with careful hands. His jaw tightened as he recognized objects taken from the dead. The railroad maps drew angry murmurs from the gathered warriors. "This man seeks to drive us from our land," Kratos said. "By making us enemies," Arthur replied. "He wanted us to destroy each other." The chief's eyes moved between Arthur and his daughter. Something passed between them, a communication deeper than words. Arthur felt the weight of judgment, of traditions older than his understanding. "You have proven yourself," Kratos said finally. "The marriage bond is blessed by truth." Arthur's chest tightened. The casual way the chief spoke of blessing made it real in a way the ceremony hadn't. He glanced at Ellie, but she was staring at the ground. A commotion erupted at the camp's edge. Horses thundered through the night, their riders calling out. Warnings. The sentry who'd been watching the approaches galloped straight to the chief's lodge. Armed men approaching. "Many of them." Arthur grabbed his rifle. "Dutch knows we were there." The attack came with brutal efficiency. Dutch's men struck the camp from 3 directions, using the darkness to create confusion. But they weren't trying to destroy, they were hunting. Through the chaos, Arthur saw Dutch himself riding toward the chief's lodge. Kratos stepped out to meet him, showing no fear despite being outnumbered. "Chief Kratos," Dutch called out. "I have a proposition." The fighting stopped. Dutch's men held their positions, weapons trained on the camp. Arthur counted at least 20 riders, too many to fight directly. "You harbored a murderer," Dutch continued. "Arthur Morgan killed my men and stole my property. Give him to me, and we'll leave in peace. Arthur stands under our protection." Kratos replied, "Then you've chosen poorly." Dutch's smile was cold as winter wind. He gestured to his men, and they began to close the circle. Arthur stepped forward, rifle ready, but Dutch raised his hand. "I have a better idea. A trade." 2 riders emerged from the darkness, dragging a bound figure between their horses. Chief Kratos. Arthur's blood chilled as he realized what he was seeing wasn't the chief beside him, but his younger brother, who'd been visiting from another band. "Wrong chief," Dutch said. "But blood is blood." The real Chief Kratos stood motionless, his face carved from stone. Arthur saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of lives against principles. "What do you want?" Kratos asked. "Arthur Morgan's ranch deed. Signed and witnessed, in exchange for your brother's life." Arthur's hands trembled on his rifle. The ranch represented everything he'd built after losing his family. 20 years of work, the only thing that connected him to the man he'd been before grief hollowed him out. "And if I refuse, your brother dies. Then we come back with more men. Your people scatter to the winds or join him in the ground." Ellie moved to Arthur's side. Her presence steadied him, but he could feel her fear. Not for herself, but for her people. For the impossible choice Dutch was forcing. "There's another way," Kratos said quietly. Arthur looked at him, confused. The chief's eyes held something Arthur couldn't read. A plan, maybe, or acceptance of sacrifice. "I allowed myself to be taken," Kratos continued. "My brother and I switched places when the shooting started. I wanted to hear this man's true intentions." Dutch's confident smile faltered. "Impossible. Your men see what they expect to see. An old Comanche in the darkness." The bound figure straightened, and Arthur saw the truth. Chief Kratos had orchestrated his own capture, using his brother as a decoy. The real question was why. "You planned this," Arthur said. "I planned for many possibilities. This Dutch is predictable. Greedy men always are." Dutch's face darkened. "It doesn't matter which of you I have. The trade stands." "No trade," Kratos said. "But I have a proposition of my own." The chief looked directly at Arthur. "The marriage bond was not accident. I have watched you for months, Arthur Morgan. You are a good man in a hard place. My daughter needs a husband who can bridge two worlds." Arthur felt the ground shifting beneath him. "You arranged everything." "I arranged the opportunity. The choice was always yours." Ellie's sharp intake of breath told Arthur she was learning this truth for the first time too. He turned to look at her, seeing the hurt and confusion in her eyes. "You used us," she said to her father. "I used wisdom. This man threatens all our people. Alone, we are vulnerable. Together, we are strong." Dutch's patience snapped. "Enough talk. Sign the deed or watch your people burn." Arthur looked at his rifle, then at the faces around him. Ellie's hurt. The chief's grim determination. The warriors ready to die for their families. The choice crystallized in his mind, clear as morning light. "I'll sign," Arthur said. "Arthur, no," Ellie whispered. He handed her his rifle. "Trust me." Dutch's smile returned. "Wise choice." But Arthur was already moving, a plan forming in his mind. He thought about Ellie's lessons in patience, about the way fire needed time to catch and burn. Some victories required sacrifice. Some traps were worth walking into. The deed lay in his saddlebags waiting. Arthur reached for it, knowing this moment would change everything. Behind him, he heard Ellie chamber a round in his rifle. The sound of trust, despite everything. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of storms to come. Arthur pulled the deed from his saddlebags with deliberate slowness. Each movement bought time for the plan forming in his mind. Dutch's men shifted restlessly, their horses sensing the tension that crackled through the night air. "Smart man," Dutch said. "Sign it clean, no tricks." Arthur spread the document on his saddle horn. The moonlight made the words dance across the paper. His ranch, his life's work. Everything reduced to ink and parchment. Behind him, Ellie's breathing was steady, controlled. She understood something was happening beyond surrender. Chief Kratos watched with eyes that held secrets Arthur was only beginning to grasp. "You know what this means?" Arthur asked, pen poised above the deed. "Progress," Dutch replied. "The railroad will bring civilization to this wasteland. And the people already here will adapt or be replaced. Natural order." Arthur signed his name with careful strokes. Each letter felt heavy, final. But finality was sometimes the beginning of something else. "There," Arthur said, holding up the deed, "one ranch." As promised, Dutch gestured to his men. "Bring it here." "Not so fast," Arthur said. "I want to see the chief's brother released first." "You're in no position to make demands." Arthur tore the deed in half. The sound cut through the night air, sharper than any gunshot. Dutch's face went white with rage. "You fool. I'll kill him anyway. Then you get nothing. No ranch, no railroad, no victory." Dutch's hand moved to his pistol. Arthur didn't flinch. Around them, the standoff stretched tight as a bowstring. "There's something else you should know," Arthur said. "About an hour ago, Ellie and I sent a rider to the territorial marshal with evidence of your cattle rustling, your attacks on the Comanche, and your plans to steal land through murder." Dutch's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check your camp, see if anything's missing." The silence stretched. Arthur watched Dutch's confidence crack. The man who'd orchestrated everything was losing control of his own game. "Even if that's true," Dutch said, "it doesn't matter. By the time any marshal arrives, you'll all be dead." "Will we?" The question came from the darkness beyond the camp. More voices joined it, surrounding Dutch's men. Townspeople emerged from the shadows, rifles ready. The blacksmith, the store owner, even the elderly pastor, his weathered hands steady on his weapon. Arthur's gamble had paid off. The evidence he and Ellie had gathered had reached more than just the marshal. It had reached the people Dutch claimed to represent. "You've been stealing from all of us," called out the blacksmith. "My tools, Henderson's grain, making us blame the Comanche for your crimes." Dutch's men looked around nervously. They'd signed up to intimidate farmers and hunters, not fight a war against an entire community. "Stand down," Dutch ordered, but his voice lacked conviction. "I don't think so," Arthur said. "See, while you were focused on me and the chief, other people were busy. Ellie's not the only one who can move unseen." Comanche warriors materialized from the tall grass. They'd used the distraction of the standoff to surround Dutch's remaining men. The trap was complete. Chief Kratos stepped forward. "You have a choice, Dutch Vanderberg. Surrender and face the territorial law, or try to fight your way out of this." Dutch looked around at the combined forces arrayed against him. His men were already lowering their weapons. "The smart ones, anyway." "This isn't over," Dutch said. "Yes, it is," Arthur replied. "The railroad can come through honest means or not. At all, the choice was always yours." The surrender happened quietly. Dutch's men gave up their weapons without resistance. The chief's brother was freed, shaken but unharmed. As dawn broke over the plains, the crisis that had threatened to tear two peoples apart was ending. Arthur found Ellie by the creek where they'd first met. She was washing blood from a small cut on her hand, her movements careful and precise. "You knew," she said without looking up. "About your father's plan, I suspected. The blanket ceremony, the convenient timing. But I didn't know for certain until tonight. How do you feel about being manipulated?" Arthur considered the question. "Grateful, I think. For the first time in years, I'm not alone." Ellie finally looked at him. "Even knowing it started with deception?" "It started with desperation. Your father saw a threat to his people and found a way to fight it. I can't fault him for that." "And us? What we've become?" Arthur moved closer. "What have we become?" "I don't know. Partners, friends, something more. The marriage bond is real to your people." "Is it real to you?" Ellie was quiet for a long moment. "I fell in love with a man who gave a blanket to a freezing stranger, who learned to make fire with patience, who signed away his life's work to protect people he'd known for days. And I fell in love with a woman who risked everything to save her people, who taught me that being alone isn't the same as being strong." Arthur reached out and touched her hand. The cut had stopped bleeding, but she let him examine it anyway. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we build something new. Your father was right about one thing. Together, we're stronger than apart." The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the night's shadows. Arthur and Ellie walked back toward the camp, where their two peoples were sharing breakfast and planning a future none of them had imagined. Chief Kratos approached them, his expression unreadable. "The bond is blessed by truth and tested by fire. It will hold." "What about the ranch?" Arthur asked. "Keep it. but make it a place where both peoples can meet, trade, learn from each other." Arthur nodded. "And the railroad? Will come or not? But on honest terms, we've proven we can stand together." Months later, Arthur stood on the bridge he and Ellie had built across the creek. Below them, children from both communities played in the water, their laughter carrying on the wind. The ranch house had been expanded to accommodate visitors from the Comanche camp. The old boundaries were becoming something new. Ellie joined him on the bridge, her hand finding his. She wore the blue wool blanket around her shoulders, the one that had started everything. It had become a symbol of their union, worn on special occasions and quiet evenings alike. "Any regrets?" she asked. Arthur looked out over the land that was no longer his alone but theirs together. "Only that it took so long to find you. It took the time it needed to take. Some things can't be rushed. And some things are worth waiting for." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and new growth. Arthur and Ellie stood together on their bridge, watching the world change around them, knowing they had been part of making it better. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.